And welcome back to the Hot Lap. We are talking practice, the final Friday practice for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And it was not, as you can see in one of our headlines, it was not all plain sailing, people. I mean, I think silly Max for that pit lane fumble. Max thinks silly Mercedes driver. We're going to get into that. ToTo Wolff versus Horner now on the Hamilton contract. As you may know, Christian Horner came out and said basically Lewis Hamilton contacted him about potentially joining Red Bull contract talks. Hamilton said, no. It was Christian Horner contacting me. I've got a text message. And now obviously ToTo Wolff is in on it and we'll be getting to his thoughts. In short, he disagreed with Horner. What a surprise. Also, we'll be looking down at practice results. Heartbreak for Sainz again going off. This time potentially a bump on the track. Russell's fastest in that first practice. But, Leclerc fastest in the second. So bittersweet for Ferrari. New sprint plans for 2024. We'll get into them. We're looking at potentially Friday sprint quali, Saturday morning sprint race. Saturday quali is back, and then we've got the race on the Sunday. McLaren also extend their Mercedes partnership until 2030 potentially. But let's get into this. This is the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. The last race, what a season it's been. What a Friday it's been. What a news. I mean, there's quite a lot of news coming out of practice. Not much about the times. As you can see here, Max Verstappen accuses silly Mercedes drivers of trying to squeeze me in the wall in Abu Dhabi. So, this is on planetf1.com by Oliver Harden. There we go. He looks a bit upset there, doesn't he? So Max Verstappen, he's accused Mercedes drivers, Hamilton and George, of trying to squeeze him in the wall in a silly practice incident. The one thing I do agree, it was very silly. Now, as we know, FP2 in Yas Marina was hugely interrupted with not one, but two red flags. One for Carlos Sainz, one for Hülkenberg. Both of them silly accidents. Especially Hülkenberg, it was almost like he just didn't have enough grip on the tyres and spun. It looked really, really silly. So unless some news comes out, silly Billy Hülkenberg. Sainz, you can kind of almost forgive more. He was sort of distracted by a car in front and he hit the bump. But even that, I can't help but wonder, could it have been avoided? But there we go. Now, as the cars return to the track for the final restart, we've got 16 minutes to go left on the clock. Verstappen was seen passing Russell and Hamilton, as you can kind of see in a headline picture just in the pit lane, overtaking the latter around the outside of the left-hand turn into the underground pit exit with his tyres just millimetres away from the wall. Russell was heard drawing attention to the incident over team radio, with Verstappen passing also the Alpine driver Gasly in the queue of the pit exit. As we know, you can do that. That is now legal. Drivers should have been told to stay to the left. There's a but, though, in a bit. We'll get into the but. But Verstappen, who was classified third behind Leclerc and Lando Norris in FP2, has hit out at his fellow competitors, insisting they had to get out of the way. He told Formula One, they have to move. They're all driving slow, and I want to go out because we're all limited on time and just keep driving in the middle. And when I tried to pass, they tried to squeeze me in the wall, so a bit silly. Verstappen is going in search of, obviously, his record 19th victory of the season, having secured a third consecutive World Championship. And the Dutchman has won every race at Abu Dhabi since 2020. Including 2021. Potentially, maybe he should, maybe he shouldn't. I personally think he shouldn't. I've been quite clear. Moving on, though. And it was definitely a memorable title showdown, wasn't it? Now, asked how much he could learn from Friday's running, though, Verstappen said not so much. And also, from our side, the balance was very off. A lot of understeer, a lot of jumping. So definitely a few things to overcome for tomorrow. To be fair, the circuit does seem to be a lot more bumpy. But let's get into it. It's on Formula1.com. 30 seconds. Is Verstappen here? Is it going to load at all? Nope. Oh, look at that. The joys of trying to play something. Here we go.
Trying to find a gap. Trying to keep himself.
I mean, look here. Okay. Let's just pause this. Okay. Forget that you're a Verstappen, a Hamilton fan, a Mercedes fan. This is in the tunnel, a really thin tunnel with, let's be honest, not much room for two cars. If two cars kind of pass, it's going to be a bit dangerous. You wouldn't try it in your family car. So why are you going to try it in a very expensive Formula One car? I know he wants to get out, but it's only FP2. The Mercedes aren't stopping. Yeah, yes, he is getting blocked. And then he kind of like
out he goes.
continue. There you go. He continues past. You can see an extra shot there where he just goes. I mean,
hugely quickly.
Here we go. Here's another shot of. I mean, there's Hamilton. He's in the middle. Yeah, okay. I think that's how he's not to the left, but still.
Through Verstappen, round the outside.
Round the outside. I mean, he's on the bit. You shouldn't go. You know, there's a reason why that's red and white there.
Never seen a move
the
there
side.
in my life.
And then he goes. He's very. I mean, he's obviously very upset about the whole thing, isn't he? So that's the Brawn thing. I suggest you watch that. We'll get a review of that. It's just absolutely awesome. But I put all the blame on Max Verstappen. He's the one that chose to go around the outside, knowing it was going to be a bit of a squeeze. Should those drivers have stayed left? Maybe. But the track, you got the two white lines for the track. They were inside the track, and you know, as left Hamilton was as left as he can go. Was Hamilton being silly? Maybe in terms of that. But at the end of the day, it was Max Verstappen making what could not really a dangerous, but a silly and unnecessary move, I feel. But there we go. That's practice. And breathe. So let's now get into ToTo versus Horner. Yes. Began on planetf1.com. ToTo's incredulous Christian Horner assessment, it says, after Lewis Hamilton's message. So, as we know, Lewis Hamilton, Christian Horner basically came out, I think in the article in the Daily Mail, saying that Lewis Hamilton has had contracts talked with us, indicating it was this year, but almost being kind of almost like grey or not really shady, but not really saying much, so potentially opening lots of questions. Toto Wolff, though, he's opened up on Christian Horner's assertion of an approach from Lewis Hamilton to obviously inquire about one of the most exciting seats, let's be fair, in Red Bull, the one that Perez currently has. Now, speaking to select media, including planetf1.com, Wolff said Christian Horner's recent comments and media statements result in character questioning. Now, in the build-up to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, Horner spoke about the controversial, and I've got a story about this, about titled Abu Dhabi 2021 in the news again. He spoke about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, alleging an approach, and he also alleged approach had been made from Lewis Hamilton's camp to inquire about a Red Bull seat along Verstappen. Horner told the UK's Daily Mail that several conversations over the years had been with Hamilton's camp about a Red Bull switch, with the team boss saying they've reached out a few times, most recently early in the year. You kind of indicate this year there was an inquiry about whether there would be any interest. Hamilton, though, has since denied the story, where he spoke to the media saying Horner's just stirring things up, and said he had no knowledge of an approach from his camp to Red Bull. I know it's come from Christian, so I don't really understand what he's been talking about, because as far as I'm aware, no one from my team has spoken to him, Hamilton said, before claiming Horner had instead been reaching out to him earlier this season about meeting up. Now, Wolff, who sat down with select media, including Planet F1, on Thursday in Abu Dhabi, was, they said, incredulous. That's always a word that I remember J.K. Rowling always saying in her books about incredulous. That's the first time I learned it. Anyway, I digress. So he basically said, I just don't know what drives the guy. We don't understand his thinking to come up with these things. What happened is that Christian, through an agency, Toto said, that we work with, wanted to have his contact details to speak about the seat. So that's how the whole thing went, and in terms of Christian inquiring about his availability. Now, Lewis had an exchange with Christian, which he immediately told me about, which was not about the seat, but it was just blah. I've seen it, he said, so I don't know what drives him to come out with this. You've won the season, be happy about it. Be humble, enjoy it. Don't make comments about Abu Dhabi 21, which are wildly off the mark, Wolff's side, and character question. I just wonder what's going up there. And Wolff obviously referring to the fact that Mercedes, Horner claimed on a Sky show that Mercedes messed up their strategy at the end of 2021 by not pitting Lewis. The fact is, had he pitted Lewis, he would have been behind Verstappen. At that point, Verstappen probably would not have pitted, and everyone did expect the race to end under the safety car due to you know, those time constraints as well. And I mean, well, yeah, there we go. Enough said about that. So, moving on, we've got our practice results. Okay, this is FP2, where Leclerc, Norris, and Verstappen. What's interesting is Leclerc, I think out of the three, Leclerc's probably the happiest with the balance, it seems. Norris and Verstappen weren't too amazingly happy. Then you had Bottas, Perez, in 5th, Russell in 6th, Zhou in 7th, Hamilton in 8th. Hamilton not being happy with the Friday, albeit there was a lot of people, as we know, we'll get into FP1 in a second, there were a lot of people that did not go out in FP1 because it was rookie central, very much so. So 9th was Gasly, 10th Piastri, 11th Alonso, 12th Ricciardo, Stroll in 13th, Ocon 14th, Tsunoda 15th. So Ricciardo, looking better than Ocon, but we're talking like, not Ocon, better than Tsunoda, but just by about 2/10. So Albon in 16th, Magnussen 17th, Sargent 18th, and the two last are the two people that brought out those red flags, Sainz and Hulkenberg. So Russell looks to have the slight edge over Hamilton, but we are talking only like a couple of tenths. A bit like Ricciardo having the edge over Tsunoda. However, Hamilton missed out on that FP1, but they really need a good free practice 3 before qualifying to really get that. So let's have a look at practice 1 then. So FP1 we had Russell fastest, then Drugovich, Ricciardo, Bottas, Stroll, Piastri, Sainz, Schwartzman, Gasly. Let's make it let's make it big, can we? Gasly, Tsunoda, Sargent, Vesti, Doohan, Porsche, Award in the McLaren, Dennis, Hajar, O'Sullivan, Magnussen, and obviously Ollie Behrman. That was your FP1, which generally doesn't mean as much because it was very, very rookie central. But what a top 3 with Russell, Drugovich going faster than Lance Stroll, albeit I think Lance Stroll, Drugovich in the Aston Martin was potentially held up or didn't, for whatever reason, potentially not his own fault, didn't have a good run there. But still, fair play to Drugovich and Ricciardo in 3rd. So qualifying could be quite interesting. A lot of it, I think, hinges on how FP3 is really going to do. But also there was talk of F1 approving a plan for a sprint format revamp for 2024. Now, the tyre blanket ban has been abandoned. This is the thing. It's done on safety grounds, which I kind of get. IndyCar, I believe, has no tyre blankets. The drivers have said it's so dangerous. But one thing I always, that has always caught me, and I thought it's a very wise saying, as Martin Brundle quite often says, the throttle works both ways. I think a lot of us would love to see would love to see the cars squirming coming out of their pits on essentially cold tyres and trying to make it work, and it would put a really interesting spin on pit strategy as well. You've probably seen an IndyCar in the past, sometimes the first lap out the pits is not necessarily going to be the fastest, so you've got the overcut potentially becomes a lot more powerful as well, and that could really change strategies as well. And you've got, for example, the Haas team, which are really good at firing its tyres up, for example, and Ferrari are as well. Will they have an advantage? I mean, that's going to be really interesting, isn't it? Where Red Bull, as we know, are really kind on its tyres. But alas, that's not happening. So moving on. So Formula One teams will be presented with plans for a sprint revamp at the start of next year, following an agreement in a meeting on Tuesday. Amid growing consensus in the paddock, it says that the current standalone sprint format is not delivering as much entertainment as hoped for, and team bosses are wanting tweaks, and I think a lot of fans are as well. Now, at the commission in Abu Dhabi on Thursday, it was agreed that freshening up of the format, we're potentially involving reverse grids for a complete revamp of the weekend timetable. One idea for sprint qualifying is to take place on Friday afternoons after FP1, and qualifying for the main Grand Prix taking place on Saturday mornings prior to the sprint race in each afternoon, or after the sprint race. But that happening. But qualifying, a big key to this is having qualifying back on that Saturday. However, there's some concern that this format opens up the risks of crashes in the sessions having a big impact. Don't crash then. But sometimes it's not always up to you, is it? As we know. So the reverse grid idea is also being considered, especially if the sprint moves away from offering World Championship points. But then it does mean a lot less. Having a sprint championship, would you really want to win that, really? The FIA Sporting Advisory Committee, though, is now going to work on details of this sprint race shake-up, and it's going to be presented at the start of next year. F1 will also settle in the next few weeks on the 6 venues for sprints next year. I want Silverstone to come back. I was there for the first sprint race. I saw that mega first lap between Verstappen and Hamilton, which was not quite copy and pasted the next day, but I do think it was part of the storyline for the next day. And the F1 Commission, it says it also agreed to abandon tyre blankets for 2025. Agreed a move to abandon blankets for 2025, which was due to be evaluated next season. That's a shame. But there we go. That's it. But big story here. I think potentially one of the biggest of the day in terms of the future of a particular team is going to be, this is from therace.com, but McLaren commits to Mercedes for 2030 for new F1 engine rules. So this is from the race. McLaren Union, it restarted, as we know, in 21, having previously run all the way from 1995 to 2014. What happened was Brawn happened, funnily enough, and then in 2010 that team became Mercedes. Mercedes did hold I think 40-something% stakehold, but a significant stakehold in McLaren at the end of the 90s and the beginning of the noughties. For whatever reason, they couldn't agree on something, and then Mercedes then went to do their own team. So, as we know, McLaren won the 2021 Italian Grand Prix, nearly won the Russian Grand Prix, had it not been for Lando, let's be fair. I think Lando's got to take that one on the chin. But it's re-established itself this year as a regular podium finisher. And you could even make an argument more successful, potentially, than 2021 in terms of points scored, having the potential to win races as well. In, I think, Qatar, maybe Mexico, they potentially had the pace, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. And that's my phone. And as my Walker says, if is F1 spelt backwards. So this was indirectly acknowledged by Mercedes boss Toto Wolff in the renewal announcement. As McLaren's form showed what it is necessary to become a more competitive, championship contender. And what's interesting is at the moment, you could argue that McLaren have a more impressive car than the works team, Mercedes. He said it's been a cornerstone of our motorsport strategy to work with strong customer teams, said Wolff. This has many advantages. It gives a clear competitive benchmark, accelerates our technical learning, and strengthens the overall F1 business case for Mercedes-Benz. McLaren have been a fierce and fair competitor since 2021, especially in the second half of this season. McLaren's strong performances underline the importance of transparent and equal supply to customer teams in the sport if we wish to achieve the goal of 10 teams capable of fighting for podium finishes. McLaren is the first team to confirm a Mercedes partnership in the new engine era, probably other than Mercedes itself. What's interesting though is the fact that McLaren, have they chosen Mercedes? Because there was all this talk about the Mercedes engine program being ahead of everyone else. There were rumours that they had been talking to Red Bull powertrains. But had Red Bull powertrains been saying no, because we're AlphaTauri, for example, or were McLaren not that impressed with Red Bull? I guess maybe we'll never know until it comes out. But there have been discussions about McLaren striking an alternative deal, for example, with Audi, interested in buying into the team and making McLaren its works partner. But McLaren's shareholders felt retaining control of the team and keeping a customer deal is a better option with Audi. I think even Porsche, they wanted control of the team. Now, McLaren Racing CEO said the extension was a sign of confidence our shareholders and the wider team have in their powertrains and the directions we're taking with them. So, I mean, fair play. Well done, McLaren. I think that's brilliant. I think if the rumours are true for McLaren signing with Mercedes, they must be fairly confident that it's going to be a good engine. And I am. If you remember in 2014, Williams had that really strong Mercedes engine, as did McLaren. Williams built a solid car, really slippery, not the best downforce car. And McLaren's downforce is really good in those medium to high speed corners, as we know. Not too great in the in the slow corners. But could McLaren, if that engine's good, pull a Williams off and do even better and challenge Mercedes? They seem to have arguably a much better grip this year on the aero department, on their aero, because that car has looked in races better than the Mercedes as well. So it's going to be really interesting going forward. I kind of hope McLaren would get maybe like a works deal with a works team, maybe. But then with Audi obviously buying Alfa Romeo, for example, that's not the case. But I've always thought, I don't know what you guys comment below if you want on this. When it comes to engine deals, when it comes to a manufacturer, I've always thought engine deals are better because yes, engines are expensive, but they're not as expensive as running an F1 team. So, for example, back in the 90s, you had McLaren Mercedes, you had You had like BAR Honda, Jordan Peugeot. It was McLaren Peugeot at one point, even McLaren Ford. You had Stewart Ford, for example, at one point as well. And you had Williams Toyota being the customer team to Toyota. There were rumours, weren't they, of McLaren Toyota, but that's obviously quite far away, simply because they have a close relationship because they shared that wind tunnel. But I always thought, as an engine supplier, it's always a lot cheaper to supply your engine. So you're not investing as much in the sport, but your name is there. If you remember BMW with Williams, and interestingly, instead of Williams BMW, the team was actually called BMW Williams. Maybe that's the way to go. But I understand that McLaren, being the successful team and car manufacturer for, let's be honest, for me, best sports cars in the world. But for McLaren, I think if someone like Audi completely buys into their team, it's gonna mess with their identity as a sports car team as well, unless that is like a long-term partnership with Audi providing engines for their sports cars as well. Anyway, I digress. We've been speaking too much. It's now 21 minutes in. This has been the Hot Lap. Thank you so much for liking, subscribing, commenting. If you do any of them, you're a champion. If you do more than one of them, you are a multiple world champion. In my eyes, we will speak to you after qualifying. Thank you very much.